Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar will be about how to create your manga from start to finish and where to share it, presented by Kat Jackson. Before we begin the webinar, there are some housekeeping items that we'd like to go through. The webinar will be approximately 1 hour long. All attendees will be muted. Question and answer session will be during the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Attendees can ask questions in the GoToWebinar question box right away. Due to time constraints, not all questions will be answered. The webinar will be recorded. The recording will be sent and shared on social media and will be sent via email to all registrants and attendees. The panelists are Mario Quiñones, myself, Joanna Brower, and Kat Jackson. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time and have never heard about Clip Studio Paint, Clip Studio Paint is your all-in-one solution for stunning, ready-to-publish illustrations, comics, manga, and animations. Learn more at clipstudio.net/n and graphicly.com. And with that, we'll pass the reins of the webinar to Kat and their presentation, how to create your manga from start to finish and where to share it. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hi everyone. How is everyone doing today? Hopefully we're doing pretty well. So my name is Kat Jackson. I am a comic and manga artist from South Dakota, USA. If you don't know where that is, that's perfectly okay. Most Americans don't know either. I'm located in central United States, sort of more towards the north. So I'm gonna make sure we got everything. Whoops. That was my bad. I totally did that. There we go. Perfect. So we should be able to see my screen. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to actually start your manga, not just drawing it, but how to think about it beforehand, how to plan it, and then thinking about, oh, how do I share this, exporting. I'm going to kind of go through all the little tidbits that people don't really talk about with making manga other than drawing. And so I'm going to be doing everything else. I'll touch on drawing just a little bit, especially when we get to paneling. But from here on, let's go ahead and get started. So, yeah, you guys want to make a manga? I like making manga. Let's help you make a manga. Manga is a really big adventure and it's a really big task, no matter how small the project that you're doing actually is. Even something like a 5-page, a 10-page, or even one chapter, which is typically about 15 to 22 pages, can be really, really overwhelming if it's your first time making something. So that's why I'm doing this webinar for all of you, to make sure that you're not overwhelmed going through this process. I'm going to be helping you by offering advice on planning your manga and then how to share it and posting it after that. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. So firstly, I want to talk about the different types of platforms you can offer. Now, I only chose three platforms here to kind of cover, but it's really, really important to think about when you're starting your manga. How do I want to share it? What kind of manga do I want to make? There's all different kinds of formats and sizes. You have your traditional page format, which we all know and love. Think of your standard tankobon volume, or even just online, it's typical page format. Then you have something like yonkoma or 4-koma, which are much like comic strips in terms of how they're formatted. Then you have things like manhwa, manhwa. There's like Korean and Chinese style manga, which have their own little variances versus like your typical Japanese manga. And then if you really want to get into little subtleties, you've got things like doujinshi, which are like fanzines. So it can get kind of complicated. Understanding what you want to do, or even just have like a general idea, will help you a lot in choosing a platform, because they're not all created equal. So the Webtoons and Tapastic are very, very similar in terms of how they're formatted. So I didn't show both of them. I just chose Webtoons because it's the more popular one that I'm aware of. So with size on Webtoons, for example, you're only allowed to post things that are 800 by 800 pixels wide by 1280 tall. That may sound really large to a lot of people, but ultimately it's really not, unfortunately. And if you upload something that's smaller than that, it'll upscale it and then it can make your work blurry. And so it's really important that you know, oh, hey, this is the size I need to export, and keep that in mind in the future once we get to the part where we start making the actual pages themselves. Also, what type of format does Webtoons typically have? They have your vertical scrolling format. You can post like traditional page format there, but it's typically not the easiest. It doesn't go very well compared to like a lot of other series. Usually they just prefer that vertical scrolling format, and usually with their featured series, usually it's, I think they call it Discovery, like their featured series, they're usually all in vertical format. And then do they have biases? No one likes admitting this, but a lot of platforms have certain biases. And it's not that they're purposely going, we only want these genres, we're going to exclude everybody else. That's not how it's like, it's not usually done on purpose, but that just tends to be the environment that they have. Webtoons and Tapastic typically favor action, romance, fantasy, comedy. Those are very, very common genres, but you have a lot of other genres like educational, history, mystery, drama, like all those other things. Well, drama is pretty popular in Webtoons and Tapastic. When I was on Webtoons, and I was on Webtoons for a little while, one of the things that I ran into is I had a mystery style story, and it did very, very poorly because it wasn't in a popular genre. The other problem that I had, and this is the point of this is the hard thing to talk about, is color versus black and white. People love color. Color is more fun to look at typically than black and white, especially when you're thinking about what type of format Webtoons is. It's technically Korean style comics, so most of them, they're not going to be your typical manga. And so you have to think about, do you want color? Do you not want color? The other reason to think about it in terms of platform is how much time do you have? Something colored is probably going to take way more time than something black and white. And so it's really, really important to know, okay, well, which one do I want to do? And if you don't know the answer right away, that's totally okay. None of these things you have to know 100% right away, but these are things I'm giving you to maybe help you kind of consider, figure out what you want to do. Then we'll kind of move on to GlobalComix. GlobalComix is another comic platform. What's actually interesting about GlobalComix is it allows a wide variety of comic types. They don't tend to just favor one type. It's definitely a newer platform compared to something like Webtoons or Tapastic. Tapastic is just the new version of Ink Blazers, if anyone remembers that. Shout out if you guys remember Ink Blazers. But anyway, so with GlobalComix, it's sort of like a universal platform. It's personally the platform that I chose. You can have your Western style comic, your manga, you can have vertical scrolling comics, horizontal scrolling comics. It's a really universal platform, and there are so many different types of comics there. It's really great. Plus, the other benefit that I found is they don't really have the color versus black and white bias that, say, like Tapastic or Webtoons might have. So that's really, really nice for someone like me who prefers to work in black and white and not color. That's the reason why I left Webtoons, is I felt like I was really struggling with having something that was in black and white. That's not saying something black and white can't succeed on Webtoons, but it'll probably be far more difficult. The other thing is Webtoons size. They don't have like a limit per se, but they have more like an advised size. And so again, here's the reason why considering your size matters. You make your comic and it's gorgeous and it's beautiful, you're ready to export, but you have to now make a version for GlobalComix, a version for Webtoons, a version for Tapastic, a version for Metabang, a version for Pixiv. For every single mirror site that you have, you now have to make a separate version, which is really annoying, believe me. I used to do it. I used to upload my stuff everywhere to like all these different platforms. And so figuring out maybe like one or two platforms you want to focus on based on what might help it succeed the most is going to be really, really important for you. With GlobalComix and its genres, it's really healthy. It's got a good balance. I've been on the platform a lot, and while it's not, again, it's not a very old platform, there's a nice, healthy mix of genres. They don't really seem to lean one way or another, which is kind of cool. Then there's Pop Comics, which is an older one. It's a little bit older than GlobalComix, but it's definitely younger than Webtoons. They have a different size requirement of 1440 wide, 30 or 2036 tall. It does have an upload max size, just like Webtoons does. With Pop Comics, you can do things like traditional format or vertical format. It doesn't really matter. You can also do what's called. Yes.
Can you slow down a little bit?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think you're going really
I'm just
fast.
excited. I'm so excited. I'm so sorry. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So, okay, cool. Thanks. So with Pop Comics, you can do a wide variety, or you can do like 3 main different formats as far as like your page setup. You can do vertical, you can do the side scrolling, you can do your traditional page format. It's really great. Now, really quick, with GlobalComix, here's what makes it different. So in traditional page format, usually when you upload something, it's whatever the size it is. And when you want to zoom in, you have to actually click on the plus button or use your fingers to try to zoom in, right? That's kind of annoying. What GlobalComix does to make it a little bit different is, say you've got your page, oops, too big a brush. Say you've got your manga here, you've got a page here, and a page here, which you can actually, or frame. What you can actually do is built into the UI of GlobalComix, you can actually create frames to zoom in so that instead of viewing the whole page at a time, you can still view the panels one by one, but still upload it into the page format. That way you don't necessarily have to worry about it being invisible or unviewable. That's why I really, really like the GlobalComix version. So that's kind of like 3 different examples of, even just with these 3, that they're very, very different in terms of their requirements. And so by looking at all of the different formats that there are, it can be really helpful in going, okay, well, I think my website would do good here, here, based on its biases, the format, and its size. So next, oops, clean that one off. Okay. So the reasons why considering your platform really, really matters is the question that no one likes to answer: who is your audience? Well, I want everyone to be my audience. That's not a valid answer, my friends. It's not. Here's why that matters. In audience, you have 2 different main categories when considering who your audience is. You have demographics and psychographics. These are 2 completely different things. Turn my snap off. There we go. Your demographics are more like what? Like, what are the people? What is their age, their gender, their race, their location, their employment? These are typically things that they can't easily change, and just what they are. How do we define them as a human being? And then we have who they are, which are your psychographics. What sort of personality do they have? What kind of values do they personally hold? What is their attitude, their interests? Think of it as like a physical versus a mental aspect of your audience. Why does this matter? When looking at Onami, which is the manga that I'll be showing you guys later for examples, it has things like magic, occult, heroes, journey, there's supernatural, that's a really long word, gods, those are the sort of things, those are the sort of things that are in that manga. And so I can go, okay, well, if I'm thinking about my audience, I'm thinking about what they also might like. So people who like Onami are probably going to be younger people. They're probably going to be people who already like series like Demon Slayer, possibly Inuyasha, or even, let's see, maybe Noragami. Whoa, that was a really bad spelling. No, I can't spell today. Noragami, so what I can do is I can say, okay, I know that people who like these series might like my series, and because of that, I can know, okay, who my audience is. Again, that can help you pick your platform. If something like fantasy and like supernatural stuff isn't popular on the platform that you've chosen, it might suffer, it might not do as well. So that's why understanding this helps. Also, when you start sharing links after your manga's done and it's posted, like you can go to some, for example, subreddits and share your manga. You're not going to take a manga like Onami, which is about magics and heroes and gods. You're not going to take that and share it in some sci-fi comic Reddit. Wouldn't make sense, right? So by understanding who you're actually sending this to, or who your targeted audience is, not just their age, not just your gender, their race, whatever, you're also thinking about who they are as an individual and what they actually like. That can help you reach the correct people, which will help you get that success that you want. So now, ooh, that got a little cut off, didn't it? Bummer, dude. Let me fix this. So the other category you want to think about is contests and publishers. With contests and publishing, it's a little different in the fact that you may not necessarily get to choose what you're doing for your manga. For example, for my manga Onami, that was my entry into the Shonen Jump Tezuka contest. And it had very specific layouts for us. We had a maximum number of pages. I don't believe there was a minimum. It had to be in black and white. It had to be like this. So what I had to do, and all of the other entrants, is make sure that my manga fit all of those qualifications and then submit. For example, the biggest thing that I saw when I was looking through some of the entries is some of the entries were in color. Like the pages themselves, the interiors were in color. However, if you look at the rules, black and white only. So there was a very large chance that those people who entered with a full color entry got automatically disqualified for simply not following the rules. The same thing applies to looking at the judges. What are their preferences? The Shonen Jump Tezuka contest had over 3,000 entries, mainly because, dude, the panelists, like Akira Toriyama from Dragon Ball, we had Kazue from Slam Dunk, we had, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, from My Hero Academia. Like we had like a crazy, even Ichiro Oda from One Piece, like it had a crazy list of judges. And there are all shonen writers, and so like thinking about, oh, how do I make a good shonen? This is also for Shonen Jump. Like you wouldn't take a shoujo and submit it to a Shonen Jump contest. Your judges, while they may like it, they're like, this is not what we're looking for. So you're not gonna win. I did not place in the contest. I was not surprised, but I still did, I still did my best, and it was great. It was really cool seeing the results, and that's my next point. One of the things that I wish I would have done is looking at past entries for very similar contests, especially other Shonen Jump contests, and look at who did win in past contests. Be like, okay, that's the standards that I need to reach, or here's what might be an example of what they're looking for, just to kind of give you guidelines, that sort of thing. The more you can do for yourself to figure out how can I do this the best, is the better you'll be. The other thing is be really active in your community. Don't just like go to Webtoons or GlobalComix or wherever and just like post your manga and like never and leave. Like make sure, if you can, reply to those people who are commenting on your stuff. Like and I'm really bad with this on YouTube. I'm constantly looking for comments to reply to. I feel really bad if I miss anything. You want to build that community around your manga. Like you want people to know that you care. Yes, to a point. You may get too large and you're just not going to be able to reply to absolutely everybody. That point will happen, especially later if you get picked up by a publisher. It's just going to be impossible to reply to everybody and all the questions. But again, while you're still small, whatever platform you're posting on, like reply to people. If you share it on Reddit and people like leave comments for you, Redditors leave comments, reply to those people. Like don't get obsessed with having to reply to everyone, but just be sure that these people know that, yes, I see you. I care that you're replying. Thank you. It's a compliment. Anytime someone gives part of their day to give you a comment or a like or whatever, anytime someone interacts with you, that's a huge compliment. And so just giving back a little bit is great. I can't tell you guys how many times people have been shocked when I've replied to them on like Webtoons or Reddit or whatever. Like people are shocked when I reply to them. They'd never expect it. So it's a pleasant surprise, and it'll just build that connection to your following, which is what you want. You will not succeed without a community to support you. You are literally just an artist who posts something. And so building that community will really make them want to support you no matter what. So now we're going to get into the section where we're actually going to be talking about the actual like meat and bread and butter about like the actual making of the manga. So the first thing I wanted to cover is what's called Kisholten kits. I forgot my line. Oop. Oop, I fixed it. So Kisholten kits is basically sort of like a writing, I don't want to call it a theory, it's like a writing format or writing style for manga. The main thing that differentiates Kisholten kits from, say, like the typical Western writing format is it's typically not conflict driven. Now, it can be conflict driven, but that's not the main purpose. It breaks the story down into 4 main chunks: Kiku, Shoku, Tenku, and Keku. And we'll go kind of break each one of those things down. Kiku, your intro, is the time where you introduce your characters. You're introducing your settings, anything that's any other information that's important about the characters, about the setting. Basically, it's like your information stage where you're giving them all of this information so that the reader will know what's going on. Your shoku is like your development stage where you're taking all of the information that you've given them and you're developing relationships, you're developing the story, you're kind of leading up to this climax moment. It's very similar to the rising action in Western style writing, where you have your information in the intro, and in the next stage, your development or rising action in its equivalent in Western writing, you're building, right? So then we have the tenku, the twist. This is an unexpected twist. It can be called a climax. In the actual Kishou Tenketsu, it's called the Yama. It's the biggest twist. If there's like multiple smaller twists, kind of like, oh, this happened, oh, that happened, oh, that happened. And then you have your one really big like climax twist, that's called your Yama. That's your biggest one. You should always have like one that stands far above the rest, just to make it clear like what is the pivotal moment for the story. And that's what you want to focus on, is whatever that major twist is, that's in your third act. That's when you show that. Now again, Kishou Tenketsu does not have to be conflict driven. That's something that is kind of hard to understand. That's something I don't want to dive too much into because I've got a lot more other content to cover, but that's something that's really important to keep in mind. The last bit, which is kekku or ochi, is like your conclusion. It's like the result of the twist. It doesn't have to be this crazy long, this twist happened and then everyone figured it out and lived happily ever after. Like, your conclusion doesn't necessarily have to be this like super satisfying moment. It can just be, and this is the result, and leave it at that. Boom, story done. It can be that simple or as complex as you want to make it. Now, taking this and looking back at a lot of the manga that's out there today, a lot of the manga they're doing really well, you know, they have the conflict, they have those things. So this is more of just like a general frame to build your work on, but because of everything being so westernized, it's kind of moved into it now has a conflict. One of the things that's very, very interesting is through some of my research, I discovered that a lot of the creators on Super Mario Brothers use Kishou Tenketsu as their base, which I found very interesting. And so now when I go play my games again, I'm going to be watching very, very closely to be sure that it's correct, which is interesting. So I hope that was kind of helpful for like how to build your story, how to think about your story, your plot. And this is all writing phase. So the next phase we're going to get into is now that we've kind of got an idea of our script, we kind of know what we want, we've got our characters designed, we've got like all of our stuff designed, we're ready to start making pages, like let's get into it. So Clip Studio, if you have the EX version, has two really cool features. Well, it's one really feature with two parts. It's called your story feature. When you open Clip Studio and you go to File, New, you have two different options here that can be used to your advantage. We have your typical comic, which is the one that most people use. It's the oldest one. What's really nifty about this creates essentially what's like a master file that manages all of your pages together. I'll show you this in just a minute, but I just wanted to bring this option up and actually show you guys what it looks like. You can set your page size if, you know, customize, or if you use like a Western style, like for a comic, all your different manga sizes. You can set your DPI, which is your resolution. So think like 300 DPI is usually good for printing. Most manga is created in either 450 or 600. So you can create all of this. If it's color, you can put it in color, your modes. It's really, really awesome. You can basically totally customize everything. Is it right to left? Is it left to right? Does it have a cover page? Does it not have a cover page? What are your margins, your templates? Like I can help, I'll just cover all of that a little bit later, but in this, you can set all that up. Now, what if you make a webtoon? No worries, Clip Studio has you covered. If we click on the option right next to that where it says webtoon, this will actually let you set up a webtoon file, full scrolling format with like preset pages. So in our example, let's just say we want a width of 800 because that's webtoons, and we want 20 pages. We'll come down here to where it says page settings, number of divisions. We want 20 pages, right? So we're gonna put in 20. Look at that. All here, it's already pre-cut for us. It's awesome. Or if you have like, there's other different options. You can also record your time lapse, just as always. Clip Studio does have the time-lapse feature, which is super fun. I've seen so many people playing with it now. It's great. But this Webtoons feature is sort of like a newer feature that they've added within the last year. So no matter what format you make, whether you do a Webtoons format or traditional comic format, Clip Studio has you guys covered. And so what does that actually look like? Let me show you. Here is my file that I had for Onami. So basically all of my pages are here, page 1, 2, 3, 4. I can actually open these pages and edit them individually, which is pretty awesome. Some of the pages are split, some of the pages are combined together into a spread. I prefer to work in a spread. I find it much easier just to kind of manage all my information if I can see both pages at a time. Plus, when I'm making my pages, I like to make sure that the two pages actually look good together and not just I'm making them separately and then find out they look really awkward when placed next to each other. So usually I'll make my pages as spreads, and then these are separated because I exported it to upload for the contest, and I chose to separate them all before I exported. So, but we're not going to get there quite yet. We're going to talk about exporting and stuff later. Comics, understanding your margins. There's two different types of margins we're going to talk about. You have your Western style margins, which are like your live area, your trim, your bleed, blah, blah, blah. And then you have kind of like a second set of margins, which are your manga margins. So they're a little different, but you can use them together to help make sure that your margins are clean and everything's in the right place. So I'm going to show you guys using some of my own examples. So these are the sketches for, excuse me guys, I'm going to get a drink. Much better. So these are the pages for my own manga. These were Onami. What you guys can see here, let me kind of dim all these pages out a bit, is we have our margins in here. You guys can actually see, let me actually just turn these off temporarily. We can see these margins, and these margins are really, really important, even if you're not going to be printing your manga. So right in here, this green area is called your live area. Live area, or sometimes it's called the safe area. This is everywhere. You want to keep everything that's important. Things like hands, feet, faces, text especially. If I turn all of these back on, we can see that right here, I kept my text in, his whole body is included in here. The face, yes, is partially cut off, but the main features of the face, the eyes, the mouth, the nose, are all included within this margin right here, which is right here. It's that green area, if you can see it. That's why it's green, it's the good area. And then the other area that we have, the sort of yellowish area, is called your trim. And that's because at the margins where the yellow meets the red is where your printer would typically make the cut. In digital, it's where your editor will crop. They don't keep all the way out here. Just because it's digital doesn't mean they're going to keep everything. And so why do they cut there? Why do they not cut on the end? Well, you have the last line, which is called your bleed, which goes right here. It's this outer margin. If you're taking artwork that goes all the way out to the edge of the page, if you stop your artwork at the trim line, you run the risk of it not being cropped properly and having like this tiny thin white sliver at the edge of your page. And that would drive people bonkers, especially your editors. They work hard enough as it is, make their lives easier. And so what you do is you take your artwork all the way out to the edge. If you want your artwork to go all the way out, you take it to the bleed line at least, and you'll see these little lines here. Stop right there. Like, don't go further than that. It's not really necessary to go further than that. So that's kind of the first part of that. But here's why a lot of this other stuff matters. When we're talking about manga, you have different categories here. So this inner area is called your hanmen. It's basically the same area as your live area. What's interesting to note about that particular area, if you guys open up a typical manga page, I'm not opening up any because copyright. If you open up a typical manga book in any tankobon, you actually look towards the center part where the pages meet, you will notice that most manga will stop right here, this middle line. So here's our middle area. Most panels will stop at the edge of this hanmen, the inner part. And they do that because this area in here is most likely going to get cut off. You won't be able to see anything. This sort of center gutter where you don't want a lot of artwork, anything that's important, is called nodo. You don't want, when I was being taught this, I was told that it's called the no-go area, but it's actually called nodo. You don't want to put a lot of stuff there. Now you can, especially if you're doing a full page spread, which is 2 pages together for like one image, or the image overlaps onto the other page, or what's called a splash page, which is where one panel for the whole page, it's like a full page image. It's called a splash. So, and then in manga, you also have other things. You have the top area, which is all above here. It's called your ten, which is easy. It's sky. You have your chi, which is like your bottom area, like how far do things go down to the bottom, how far do things go to the top. And then on the sides, you have koguchi, which I wrote in English here because I don't know how good my pronunciation is. Koguchi. So that's sort of like your sides there. So all of your margins matter, even if you're not printing your work, because if you have an editor who's working with you, they're going to want to make sure that all of your lines are and edges and paneling is clean. So yeah, that's a lot to think about. The other thing that's really interesting to notice is what is called Komawari. Komawari is sort of like the science of, it's not really science, like science theory of how you plan your manga pages out. For example, in a chapter, remember a chapter is about, so let's, for theory's sake, it's about 20 pages. Your first 2 to 5 pages are what are called, rough, meaning there's not a lot of panels to them. It's like maybe 2 to 4, 5 is pushing it, like 2 to 4 panels on a page. So it's low action. It's sort of building up into it. Remember Kishoten kits, they do this on their pages also, as far as like how, like at the beginning of your manga, so if this is your manga, the first 2 to 5 pages have small numbers of panels, which are called rough. The middle of your manga, they're called dense pages. They'll have higher numbers of panels because that's your action. So it's maybe something like 4 to 7 or maybe even 8 panels on a page. And then towards your last 2 to 5 pages, you're going to go back down to rough. This is pretty much the exact same example as Kishoten Ketsu, where your action builds up, you have your climax, and then you go down. It's literally everywhere in writing and stories. So understanding this idea of having low action, high action, low action creates a smooth flowing story that doesn't feel stagnant. It's really easy for stories to get really stagnant when creators don't pay attention to how their comics and the way they panel actually affects the reader psychologically. There's like a whole theory behind that, but what you're looking for is called, I'll write it for you, it's called Komawari. The Silent Manga Audition has a wonderful article about this, and they also have some of the stuff on their YouTube channel as well. So make sure you look into that if you're interested in more. So we're going to move on to the next section, which is like when you actually make the pages, or what sort of steps do you have when you're actually putting this together? And so the first thing is, you have your script. And then when you're starting to do your pencil, starting to figure out what you want your page to look like, that's called your name. Some people know it as nemu. So that's sort of like the other name for it is pencils. That's what we call it in Western comics. Some people go otherwise and call them layouts. They're all generally basically the same thing. You're figuring out the panel layout that I want, what sort of expressions do I want, what sort of like posing do I want. That's basically the whole point of that, is to get all of that kind of figured out as you go. And usually it's easier to do what's called batch processing. You do all of the scripting, then all of the pencils and Nemu. You do all of that together. And then when you're ready for the next stage, you go into your inks. Some people call this a line art. It's pretty much the same thing. What I usually do for this, what I ended up doing is I did all of my black fills as well. The other thing to consider, which is really important, is your lettering. So most people, or text, and this includes everything from sound effects to speech bubbles, thoughts, whatever. Most people start their lettering in the name phase. They're figuring out, where do I want this bubble to go? Where do I want that? Where do I want this? They do all of that in advance so that they're not doing these like beautiful artworks after you get to the tones, and then you have to cover it up with text. Like, how depressing is that? It's the same way when you're doing a vertical scrolling format. You'll make your name, you'll put in your panels, you do all this stuff before you do your, you'll do your name, and then you do your ink, and then you do your tone, and then if somewhere usually around here you also do your text, or lettering as they call it. So there are actual people that have jobs called letterers. I know a letterer who works on One Punch Man. He's awesome. He's super sweet. He's really funny. And he was the one who taught me about doing the text early on. That way I can go, oh, well, now I don't have to worry about covering up my beautiful artwork after I'm done with the text. So looking at how to break your artwork down into manageable steps so that you're not like, oh my gosh, I have like all these pages to do. I'm so overwhelmed. How do I do this? You break it down into step by step by step by step, and everything gets suddenly way easier. So now that we've done our pages, what are some other fun things to consider? Assets, my friends. Assets. Clip Studio has these amazing things called assets. And what these are things that you can download from other users. They have an entire, let me actually open up my assets manager. Oh, it's on my other screen. Boop, boop, boop. So we have our assets here. You can find it by your launch window. You can go in here, you can type in pretty much anything you want. So I'm gonna type in cat because that's my name, even though I spelled it wrong. So I can type in cat, and I can find all kinds of cat stuff. Maybe cat eyes, cat brushes, cat poses, cat earphones, cat willows. Like, you can literally come here, you can type in, you can find all kinds of things. You can have brushes, you can have poses with 3D models, you can find like backgrounds, you can find all kinds of things. Like if I type in, say, like jungle, let's say I'm going to be doing a jungle background, I can type in jungle and see, oh look, here's grass, here's leaves, here's presets, here's brushes. Here are all kinds of useful tools that I can now use for my disposal. Now, some people may not like this because using assets is cheating. It's not, okay? The phrase that I'm looking for is called work smarter, not harder. In the end, no one, I don't want to say no one cares how you get it done, but your editor, if you ever have one, is going to want it on time. And if you're the person who wants to sit here and go, I want to draw every single line of the leaf by hand because it's pure artistry, like, that's nice, honey, but can you finish on the deadline on time? You know what I mean? So instead of me having to draw this all the time, I've got my assets over here, and I wanted to show you guys how I kind of manage mine. I have different categories that I've created where I organize them. Here are kind of all the weird circles that I have. Here are some of the flowers that I have. Like here's a sakura cherry brush. Ooh, that's colored. Did you guys know that you can, by using your foreground and background color, you can set those colors? If I want a green sakura, I can have a green sakura. Let me go find some. Let me go find some clouds here. I want some green clouds. Woo! Isn't that awesome? Heck yeah, it is. It's great. So using your assets are something that you can use for yourself. You can download 3D models and bring them in. I'm not going to do that because that tends because that can get a little silly. So, but you can download all of this stuff. You have all of these brushes you can download. Here's my actual asset manager. Let me hide some of this stuff. Actually kind of show you. I've downloaded a lot of balloons. Whoops. I've downloaded a lot of balloons. There's screen tones, there's patterns, there's backgrounds. All of these assets are there for you to use, copyright free in all of your work. So take advantage of it. So, okay. Exporting. When you go to export a manga, super easy. File. Export multiple pages or Webtoon, whichever one you're doing. This is normal pages, so I'm going to hit multiple pages. And guess what? There's a PDF option for anyone who wants to sell their manga. Clip Studio now has, with their last update, a PDF export option. Fan-freaking-tastic. I'm so excited. If you don't want a PDF, you can go to batch export, and then you can decide, oh, what format do I want? Do I want PNG? Do I want a JPEG? Yes, it can matter. I'm not going to go too far into it. I just wanted to show you guys how you do it. And then if you're exporting a Webtoon, you would do the same. File, export Webtoon. You can also export a page as a single image if you want. So if you want like just that page for like say your portfolio or like a background or something, you can go into export and then whatever your file format is. So pretty nifty stuff. And then what if you can't draw? I get this question a lot as a manga creator. You know, Clip Studio and Graphically, they have a lot of resources for people to use. Namely, just like these webinars, you know, they also have resources and they have like an actual ask and they have like a forum. You can go to places like YouTube and Reddit where they have like actual, like, for example, the Clip Studio subreddit, full of information. It's awesome. It's fantastic. If you're insisting that drawing isn't for you, like say you're a writer, and you want to look for a team, that's totally cool. That's awesome. Keep in mind though, and I'm going to say it, a lot of creators don't like working for free. Now you may believe in your project, but it's going to be one of the harder things you do to like get people to believe in your project as well. It can be a little frustrating going, oh, well, I can't draw, blah, 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 and you're trying to find people to work for you, but you actually just don't physically have the income to give them, which is fine. A lot of times what people can do if they want to work as a team, they can either say, hey, well, we're going to share all of our future profit, or we'll share ownership of the project. That's an option, but keep in mind that you have to consider how much time you and the people that you have on your team are going to be giving to that project. For example, if I have a 40-hour-a-week day job, and then I make my manga. Like my manga already takes up about 3 hours of my day after work. So I only have about an hour or 2 hours a day that I can give to someone else on their project. That's not really a lot of work that I can do for them. And so when most people approach me and say, hey, can you work on my manga? I have to say, no, I just don't have the time. I'm sorry, I can't work for free right now. If I had more time, maybe. So that's just something really important to consider. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just important to consider. One thing I do want to quickly talk about is GlobalComix. So that's where I like to hang out. That's where I post my stuff. They do have a new place called the Talent Marketplace because it's really hard to find artists. It's really hard to find jobs. Going through things like Upwork and Fiverr, they don't pay that well. You don't really have a way of like posting your own rates. Or say you go to like Craigslist or something, it's just an absolute nightmare. They allow you to post looking for jobs and looking for people. It's brand new. I definitely recommend you guys look to it because it's literally just for comics and manga. It's not like going to Upwork or Fiverr where it's like all arts together. They're just kind of like all mixed. You can actually specifically say, hey, I can do colors. Hey, I can do inks. Hey, I can do pencils. And you can make a listing just for those things or for all of your skills. And so you can also link a portfolio. You can list all of your experience there. It's really great. I'm still kind of dabbling my feet into the talent marketplace as well, because like I said, I do post my work to GlobalComix anyway, but since that's where I hang out, I wanted to be sure I share that information with you guys. Definitely make sure you check it out. And then lastly, making a manga is hard. It's not easy. It's not as simple as putting squares on a page with some text and calling it done. It can be really frustrating when you've spent a really long time working on a project and you're just overwhelmed with all the stuff that either you've done that hasn't worked out or you've not even started yet and you're just like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? That's what I wanted to kind of share with you guys, is sort of like, how do I look at a manga, thinking about where I want to share it, who I want to see it, and then how do I break the manga step by step down into a process that doesn't feel so overwhelming. And I know I gave you guys a lot of information, but last thing I want to drop with you guys is my own manga that I did, Onami, was 50 pages. I had 120 days to do it. That's a lot. Or that's not a lot of time. That's a lot of pages for a short amount of time. And half of those days I had a dislocated arm. So that wasn't a very pleasant experience, believe me. But because I knew I still had a process and I knew step by step what I could do, it made the process a little bit easier so that I didn't feel so overwhelmed despite all the chaos that was going on in my life at the time. And it wasn't my best work. That's okay. I honestly had to cut about 10 to 15 pages out of the story to make it fit for the contest specifications. And my next series, I spelled next wrong. My next series is Ghost Child. It'll be released in June of this year, so a couple months. I've been working on it for 11 years, you guys. 11 years. I started it in 2010 when I was studying animation at Ames Community College of Art and Design. Way back when I was fresh out of high school. And I took the project with me to art school. I went to England College of Art and Design, studied illustration there. And so I took that project with me and kept developing it. It's been an animation, a painted comic, a cel shaded comic, a webtoon, a manga, and now it's going to be a manga again. So it's had 6 different versions. Am I frustrated? It's been 11 years and I'm still not done with chapter 1? Yes. However, I've been taking the time to learn and learn and learn. I did an internship with a manga publisher in 2018 that like changed my life, mind blown during that internship. And so I was able to take everything that I'd learned, start a few pages of like a manga, and then I realized, okay, I'm not ready yet. I need to learn more about this writing method called Kishotenkis. And so I stopped and I learned about that. And then I learned a lot about Komawari when I did my Onami manga. So like every step it's been a process. 11 years for one manga is a lot of time. I'm going to be honest, it's a lot of time. But be patient with yourselves. Be willing to accept that your first draft won't be good. And that's where I am. My first 5 drafts were not that good. And the next one's going to be better. So I hope that was helpful to you guys. I hope that was interesting information. Hopefully, you guys learned something from that. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media. I'm always happy to help out. Thanks.
Okay, then let's go into questions because we have a lot and
oh
my
goodness.
God.
I'm ready.
Yes. It's all like super interesting questions too. So there's gonna be some talking, I'm sure. First, maybe short questions. Like, what was the part that cost the most when doing your manga? What was the most expensive thing? Yeah, when creating it.
Well, in terms of time, the most expensive part for me is definitely my inking process. I'm sure you guys have seen that my inks are like really crazy. My inks are like really crazy detailed. And so like sometimes doing all these details, even if I'm using assets and brushes, it can take a really long time. As far as like financially the most expensive, when I was doing my manga on paper, the paper was definitely the most expensive because I imported deleter paper from Japan. And that was really pricey.
Yeah.
That was really expensive.
Oh God, yeah. Okay. But like I suppose like that's also a good way why you probably transition to digital.
Yes.
Yep. Just a little bit cheaper. Just a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, it's a little well, not only that, it's also easier to edit. Like you can sit there and do this beautiful drawing on paper, but if you suddenly realize something is the wrong size, you can't just Control T and transform it. You have to go into and edit it, and that's a hard part of the process. So working digitally helps save me time too.
Yeah. And like screen tones, they are very expensive.
Yes, like $80 for like one.
Yeah, of course. Okay, next question. So the artist has a wonderful story in their head. Maybe even a script. When is someone ready to draw a manga?
You're always ready. I know that sounds like a not very helpful answer, but let me explain. So deciding when you're ready to actually make the pages, especially in terms of skill level, is really, really intimidating. My first comic I drew when I'd only been drawing for 2 years. So heads up, guys, I started drawing when I was 18 years old. I'm 30 in June. So that wasn't that long ago. My first rendition of the comic was done in 2015. I started drawing in 2010. So I'd only been drawing for 5 years. And even before then, I'd been making versions of the comic, like trying to work it out. The sooner you start on the visuals, the more time you'll have to work out the kinks in the visuals so that everything is done smoothly. And here's the thing, you don't have to share it online. If you want to make like the first draft of like say your first chapter for yourself, by yourself, and keep it to yourself, dude, do it. Like, do that and have that ready for you so that when you feel you are ready for your skill, you've already started working out the paneling. You've already started working out character designs. You've already started that process. And then when you're ready, skill wise, dude, you're going to be set. That's exactly the position I am. I've done my comic, 5 times already? And now that I feel I'm at the, yeah, exactly. And now that I'm at my 6th rendition, I finally feel like I have the proper skill level to really make this make the artwork for the manga what it deserves to be. So you're always ready.
Good. Yeah, I think it's great. Like, waiting to be perfect is probably not gonna get anything published.
You'll never be perfect, ever. Perfection is impossible.
Yeah. How do you deal with, like, you work on a manga for a very long time, and then you look back at it and you say, oh my God, my style has changed so much. Do you start over? Do you deal with the changes? How do you go about that?
The big thing is I see each stage as something that I've learned from. I try to never look at myself and be discouraged as far as how long it took me. Every single step that I did was something that I learned something from it. My old version that I did in 2016, which was like a cell shaded like Western comic style version of my manga, it sold 377 books. So like it still did well. It wasn't my favorite, it's not my favorite version, but I was able to learn from that process. And even the next version that I did, I almost never posted it online. That version was in 2018 when I was doing my manga internship. I didn't really post it anywhere, but I still learned from it. So looking back at your previous versions shouldn't be something you look at and go, ew, cringe fest, ooh, ooh. Like, you shouldn't look at it like that. You should look at it as like, what did I learn? And if you have to, write it out. Like, take a day, sit down, write out what you learned from it, and that way you can help like process that information. So don't ever get discouraged by the amount of time you spend on something or how many renditions you have. But at the same time, if you decide to change the style, like, you better be all or nothing. like if you're gonna go for it, and don't be ashamed to change the style.
How detailed do you think the idea has to be to start working? Like, how much development needs to go into the script before you can start, like, for your manga? Like, how much do you already know about the story and how you're gonna lay it out?
That's a really, really good question. So there's different ways to approach it, and I think it kind of depends on if you're a team or you're working by yourself. Me personally, I actually have my script completely already written out for my Ghost Child manga, and when I did Onami, I actually had my script completely written out before I even started doing the name. I had everything already ready to go before I even started, but I was already starting to draw out the characters, draw out the landscapes. Like, I was in a comfortable place where I knew what the characters looked like. I knew what the environments looked like. I had all of that already settled. And so it's like, okay, well, I've already got the script done. I've now done some basic drawings of what the characters look like so that I'm comfortable enough with their designs. Let's go ahead and start doing pages. However, something to consider is that even if you don't have the characters fully fleshed out, I do believe that you can start on your name or your pencils, your layouts, and use just like generic looking characters. Like, like, for example, like, may know that this drawing was Pon, but when I drew it, it was just like a person standing there with a stick. But like, I knew that it was Pon, I knew who that was. When I was doing this particular character, I knew it was this character, but I hadn't quite fully fleshed out what he looked like. Fun fact, he has 4 wings. He only had 2 until I started the inking phase. Like, last minute I added that. And so like, you may have changes that happen throughout your series as you're making them. And so it's like, oh, whoops, I didn't mean to change that design.
Yeah.
But
how do you stay consistent if you change a lot of things? Is that difficult for you?
It can be. For example, when I made this change, I had to go back into some of my old pages and make that change. The whole idea of breaking something down into a process is so that you have the least amount of guesswork possible, the least amount of changes made last minute, because that's just extra energy you have to burn now making those changes. As far as character consistency, the number one thing you can do for yourself is to make a reference. I know artists and reference sheets, we don't blend well together, but it is a critical part. When you're doing animation and manga, they have those things. They have a full character turnaround. They have a few basic emotions, and then they have like a section where they draw all of their different like items or tools, things that they may see commonly. That kind of sheet for each of your characters is going to be really, really important to help you stay consistent and also settle on a design that you like.
Speaking of design, and you talked about how your line art is very detailed. Like, how do you know when to stop with sketching or inking to not overdo it?
Well, that's a stylistic thing. I think personally, sometimes as especially, so say you take the artist of like say One Punch Man versus Akira Toriyama. Like they are two completely different styles, two completely different looks. Those artists know, hey, I'm gonna have my style consistency. This is what I want to do. That's why I said it might be okay to go ahead and start playing around with like pencils and the layouts, even while you're still finishing your script, just to figure out what style do you want. Do you want to do something really crazy detailed like One Punch Man? Do you want to do something kind of in the middle, like say Hunter x Hunter or Yu Yu Hakusho, where there's like some inking and there's a lot of inking and some tones, but not very many? Or do you want to go into something that's like really crazy simple, like say Dragon Ball, where there's just not a lot of tones, it's just very, very simple lines, but a lot of it's action. And so part of that is just deciding what look do I want, and then figuring out how to be consistent in that look. What I would recommend is if you don't have a sample with you in your office or your home, wherever you work, get some. I went out and bought like hard copies of some manga that have the look that I want, mainly Noragami, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Fullmetal Alchemist. I love that sort of like middle ground look. And so I went out and I bought some so that I can sit here while I'm drawing and see, how did this artist draw something like that? How did they shade this? Did they tone that? Have samples, have references.
Okay, fantastic. Just a bit of a technical question. I know like for web-based comics, it's not as strict anymore, but what is your recommended length for a chapter? I know in Japan that's really strict.
Yeah, Japan can be pretty strict. Typically, I usually say between like usually for me, I do like 18 to 26 pages. I try not to go as low as 15, which I know exists, and I try not to go as high as 30, which I know exists. So usually I'll settle it kind of in the middle between like 18 to 26. Most of my chapters are only 20 to 25 pages. That way it's a nice set of 5 numbers. The only thing you have to consider is, when you're doing odd or even numbers, is how is it going to look in terms of your final count, because most books are in counts of 4 just for printing purposes. And so thinking of that final number, if you plan on printing your manga, is really important to make sure it's always a multiple of 4 when everything's done, exteriors, which are like your covers and stuff, and your interiors, which is like the actual like body of your story, making sure it always adds up to 4 if you plan on printing.
Yeah. Okay. In that line, having a full epic as a beginner is pretty scary. Even if you have the idea.
Don't do. No, here's why. If your first story is going to be this huge, crazy epic, like you are going to be so easily overwhelmed. It's easier to stick to smaller, and even you can keep the epic, like you can keep working on it, but do short stories. If you, because especially if you've not made a manga before, if you can't handle a 10-page story, there's no way in heck you're going to handle a 20-volume story. Like you need to know if this is what you really, really want to do. Too many people jump off the deep end into this crazy, huge, like 100, like multi-100-page story when they've never even done a 15-page story or one chapter story. For me, doing Onami, which is 50 pages, which is more than twice it's more than 3 times what I did previously, which was 16 pages. It was a huge jump. That just from 16 to 50 is a humongous jump. And it got a little overwhelming sometimes. And now that I'm realizing that my next story is going to be like 600 pages, I'm going to need to, Ghost Child is going to be it's about 4 volumes, 3 to 4 volumes. And so it's like, that's going to be a huge jump for me. But because I made those failures, I made those mistakes and not being prepared, I feel like now I can be better prepared for that journey.
Yeah. I got a good question in that regard, because you also mentioned you're working a regular job. It's like, how do you stay motivated while having a job and still drawing your drawings?
I live for my work. I live for what I do. As I said before, like I went to college, I went to art school. Like I can go to work and it's not fulfilling, but it's also creative in a way. I work as a printer, and so I operate specialty printing systems, and so I'm sitting there thinking about art and creative stuff all day long. And literally all I can think about when I'm at work is my manga. I have like a post-it notes, and I'm always drawing pages and drawing my characters. Like I'm literally, I hope my boss doesn't watch this. I'm always drawing, especially on my breaks and my lunches. It
Huh.
is literally all I think about. And I
Yeah.
think finding that project, that story that just like consumes you to the point where like you just love it so much, you
Yeah.
you just can't help but want to do more. Like my favorite line from someone is, if all you can dream and scheme is about it, and life seems useless and worthless without it, if you'd gladly sweat for it, fret for it, and plan for it, then lose all your terror of the opposition for it. If you simply go after the thing that you want with all of your capacity, strength and sagacity, faith, hope, and confidence, and stern pertinacity. If it's really long, but the line ends, basically what it's saying is that if all you can think about is that, and if like you'd gladly like suffer and lose sleep, and like that's all you can possibly think about, then that's what you should do. And that's the thing, is you have to love manga, especially if you want to get into being a professional. I mean, like, you are going to lose sleep. That's just part of the
Mm.
reality,
Yeah.
especially if you want to become a professional. Somewhere out there, I forget where, like, whose schedule it was a mangaka's schedule, and he sleeps like 3 hours a week or 3 hours a night. It's crazy. But like, you have to be prepared to sacrifice for that. But I can
Mm.
tell you, if you're understanding that these sacrifices are there and they might happen, and that doesn't scare you, like, you have to figure out a healthy life balance. But for me,
Mm.
it's literally all I think about. And so
Yeah.
that's for me how I keep going, is that's all I can think about. And my teacher back in art school, like he gave everything for me, and my goal is to make him proud. And like, my art school wasn't very fond of manga, and I was told to stop drawing manga all the time. And
Mm.
so like, I've got that motivation too.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain passion, because passion is something kind of intangible.
Yeah.
But you
Mm.
kind of know when you have it, and if you don't have it yet, maybe it's not the right story.
Mm.
Like, maybe, yeah.
That brings us probably to the last question, because we're a tiny bit over already.
Oh,
But
sorry.
we've had so many good questions.
Yes.
A bit on the difficult side, I would think, but
Okay.
if you have any tips on that, it's like, how do you know your idea is a good idea?
I think all ideas are good ideas. The
I
question
suppose
is,
if you lose sleep, it can't be that bad.
yeah. Well, right, exactly. But here's the thing: all ideas are good ideas. However, the execution matters. For
Hmm.
example, like if your idea is like a girl is being stalked by a wild monster. Okay, well, guess what? Like, Red Riding Hood. That's one version of this. You have like all these different like mythologies from all over the world are people being stalked by monsters. Like, pretty much any idea that you have is going to be already done. It doesn't matter if you look at what the core of what your idea is. 99% of the time, it's probably already been done. However, thinking about how can I make this story like have a twist of its own to make it its unique own story is hard. It's
Hmm.
really hard to be unique nowadays, especially with so many creators and the internet, like connecting all of us together. It's much easier to find people that already have something similar to yours. But as far as knowing if it's good or not, the best thing you can do is get feedback. Get feedback from other people. I have an editor who works for a top publisher in New York, and he gives me feedback he will give me feedback if I ask them. So like, which is really cool. They've offered that for me, but not everyone has that. So what you
Yeah.
can do is you can go to smaller places, get feedback. If you're scared to share your work with someone because you're afraid they're going to steal your idea, you're not going to get very far. Like, you need to be willing and be open to get that community feedback, because someone may see a plot hole and you don't see it. And it's like, oh, I wish I would have known about that plot hole. Oh, well, I wish you would have opened up and shared it with someone so that they could tell you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So like, get that community feedback. And
Yeah.
sometimes you may have a good story, but everyone thinks it's bad. I know how people feel about her, but look at J.K. Rowling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people didn't think it was a good idea. Like, she got rejected so many times, and then she finally had one person who believed in her and published her work, and now look at it. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes you will have to decide for yourself if you believe the work is good, and make sure you know how to properly execute that. So you can have a good idea, but if you have a bad execution, it's going to look like a bad idea.
Yeah.
So
I think we could probably keep talking about this for another hour,
yes.
but unfortunately, unfortunately, we're out of time at this point. So I'm really sorry to cut it off here. But thank you so much for all your insight and all your guidance to how to start a manga and drawing and everything. So it was very, very informative. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So thank you so much, Kat. Thank you so much, Joanna, and all of you who joined us today. I'm pretty sure that we all learned a lot. So we need to process now all the information because thank you so much, Kat. You share with us a very valuable lessons about your experience. And also, I want to share with you one last bit of information that you can all learn more about Clip Studio Paint in our website, clipstudio.net/n and graphicsly.com. And a quick reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded in Clip Studio Paint channel and also in YouTube, in the YouTube channel of Graphicsly. So also for more information about Kat, don't forget to follow her. Follow there, and ArtCrumbs in Twitter, ArtStation, YouTube, and also at GlobalComix. So yeah, make sure to follow Kat on the YouTube channel because there are a lot of great things coming, right?
Yep. I also stream 2 nights a week. I stream Tuesdays and I stream Fridays. I love taking questions and hosting demos during those times. So it's the perfect opportunity to stop and actually ask me something. So yeah, for sure, join my YouTube channel and I'll happily answer questions as they come.
Okay, thank you, Kat. Thank you, Joanna, for today's session.
Of course.
And a reminder that you can follow us on social media and stay tuned with more events and more webinars in the coming weeks. So stay tuned and see you on our next webinar. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.